Have you ever made a to-do list that looks amazing, but by the end of the day, almost nothing has been crossed off? And then naturally, you felt bad about that. Maybe you had a stern talking to with yourself about your complete inability to do even the smallest task. And you probably said some pretty unkind things, am I right? Well, let me say this with my whole chest. You are not lazy. You're probably burnt out. My name is Dakota Rebel, and this is Rebel with a Plan. I am a type A ADHD person, and I am all too familiar with the desire to hustle, 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 while my body and my brain are just screaming for rest. So I developed the energy-aware planning system to help me recognize my own patterns of self-destruction. And the more I worked on it, the more I realized how helpful this was going to be for a lot of other people. So here we are, day 1 of the Energy-Aware Planning System series. If you are not subscribed yet, please make sure that you hit that button, because this series is going to help teach you how to work with your energy instead of constantly just trying to power through, which, by the way, makes your burnout even worse. Ask me how I know. So are you ready? Let's dive in. Let's be real, to-do lists are supposed to be helpful. They're meant to give us structure, to keep us focused, and to help us get stuff done. But if you've ever looked at your task list and felt completely overwhelmed before you even got started, if your list has become more of a guilt trip than a productivity tool, you are not alone. Because to-do lists are built on one big faulty assumption, that your energy is consistent, that it's predictable, maybe even that it's unlimited. But for most people, especially neurodivergent people, people who are dealing with chronic illness, fatigue, pain, or even executive dysfunction or anxiety or depression, your energy is none of those things. Here's the reality. Energy is not just one big bucket. You don't wake up every day with the same amount of points that you get to spend on whatever you think you should do that day. Energy is layered. You've got physical energy, which is what your body can handle. You've got mental energy, which affects your focus and your understanding, your memory, your decision-making, your problem-solving abilities. And you've got emotional energy, which is your capacity to handle things like feelings, but also stress and conflict, or even just basic human interaction. When we're burnt out, it's not usually just one of these energy buckets that gets affected. Maybe your body is tired, your brain feels foggy, and your heart feels just heavy. None of that is laziness, it's depletion. So back to those to-do lists, most of them do not take any of this into account. Those lists always assume that we are all starting at 100%. They assume that checking off a task is just a matter of willpower. But if you are already running on fumes, physical, mental, and or emotional, those tasks don't just become difficult to complete. They can be impossible. And here's the trap. When you can't complete those items, it never feels like the list is the problem. It feels like you are, like you're lazy or unmotivated or broken in some way, but you're not. You are just operating with a different energy system than that task list can provide for. Think about this. If you had a broken leg, no one would expect you to run a marathon. But when you're emotionally drained or mentally fogged or having a chronic pain flare up, most people, including you, still expect you to do all the things. The dishes, the emails, the grocery runs, making dinner. It doesn't make sense, but we do it anyway because we've gotten used to measuring our worth by how much we can get done. And when your energy is inconsistent, that becomes a vicious cycle. You make your list every day like you always expect your best self to show up. And then life happens and your energy drops. So you don't get any of it done. And instead of adjusting the plan, you just blame yourself. That cycle of unrealistic planning, inevitable burnout, and crushing guilt, that's what we're here to break. Because planning isn't supposed to feel like punishment. It is supposed to help you work with your energy, not pretend that the limit doesn't exist. That is what energy-aware planning is all about. It's not about giving up on productivity. It's about redefining what productivity even means when your capacity changes day to day. It's about noticing energy flows, physical, mental, and emotional, and building a plan that makes sense for that. Because you already know the truth. There's nothing wrong with you. The problem has never been about your motivation. The problem is the system you've been taught to use. You were handed a blueprint designed for a robot, and in this day and age, probably designed by a robot. And then you were told to feel guilty when you couldn't keep up. But obviously, you are not a robot. You are a human being, someone with a brain, a body, a heart, and a nervous system, and they all have limits. So if you've been feeling like your to-do list is just a big, long reminder of all the things you didn't get done, this is your official invitation to try something new. And don't worry, because the system is not about doing less forever. It's about doing what makes sense today, every day, and building something that honors your energy instead of constantly fighting against it. Let's talk about the person you usually plan for. They are a rock star. They're motivated, they're laser focused, they're hydrated, and they always remember to switch the laundry. Yes, I switched the laundry today. I did. They wake up early. They do yoga at dawn. And then they drink something green through a glass straw. And they never touch the snooze button. You know them, right? You've probably seen their highlight reel. Maybe on Instagram, dancing through an immaculate kitchen while they choreograph their meal prep. Maybe in Pinterest articles with titles like 10 things successful people do before 10 a.m. Maybe in a sea of clean girl aesthetic TikToks where they don't have a single glass of water next to their bed. They feel familiar and they feel unattainable because guess what? That's not attainable. They're not real. That is not real life. That's content. That is editing and lighting and photo cropping and 15 takes to make it look natural. It is curated for performance, for entertainment, for clicks, not for you, and definitely not for your Tuesday morning brain fog. And yet, so many of us make our plan as if our ideal self is going to show up every day. You sit down on a Sunday with the best of intentions. You plan out your week full of structured routines and color-coded appointments and the highest of expectations. And you think to yourself, this is the week I get my life together. And maybe if everything goes perfect, it'll work on Monday. But then Tuesday comes. You didn't sleep well. You're overwhelmed by messages. The laundry is still in the washing machine. You're drying yourself off with a washcloth, if you manage to take a shower at all. You're stressed out about money or work or relationships. You know, life happens. And when it does, that list, that beautiful color-coded plan, it's literally impossible. So what happens next? You blame yourself. You question yourself. You think, why can't I just follow through? Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? Nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. You designed a plan for a fantasy person that doesn't even exist. You built it for someone who never runs out of energy, for someone whose capacity never changes, for someone who is not affected by things like stress or guilt or the chaos of life. And that kind of planning is not just unhelpful. It is actively harmful, because when you build that schedule for who you wish you were instead of who you actually are, you are setting yourself up to fail from the jump. And when failure happens, you don't learn to adjust. You just internalize it as a personal flaw. But it's not, because that plan was not built for you. When you have a rough week, when you have ADHD or executive dysfunction, when you wake up with joint pain or anxiety or depression, that is the version of you that needs support. And that is the version of you that needs to be at the center of your planning system. Because self-support doesn't come from forcing yourself to live up to some ridiculous standard. It comes from planning with compassion, with flexibility, with the understanding that your energy is real and it is valid even when it's low. Let's reframe it. Your planner is not a magic wand. It is never going to turn you into a different person. It cannot make you more disciplined or more productive or more like those influencers on TikTok. But it can be a tool, a useful, supportive tool that helps you figure out what you need, what you can handle, and what actually matters today. When we plan based on actual capacity, we start to experience what I call gentle success. You do what you can without burning yourself out trying to do it all. You learn to celebrate your effort, not seek perfection. and you build self-trust instead of shame. And all of it starts with letting go of that fantasy self. You do not have to become your ideal self to be worthy of care or success or progress. You do not need a perfectly balanced life. You need a realistic one that honors your physical limits, one that respects your mental load, one that accounts for your emotional bandwidth. Because when your plan meets you where you actually are, you want to talk about a magic wand. That is when progress becomes possible. Not because you forced yourself to be better, but because you gave yourself permission to be human. Are you still with me? Good, because it is time to bust the biggest, most obnoxious myth, maybe ever, the bane of a neurodivergent's existence. You just need more willpower. It's classic advice, though. You hear it everywhere. If you really wanted it, you'd make it happen. You just need to be more disciplined. Get up earlier. Stop making excuses. Push harder. Obviously, none of that is helpful. And worse, it's almost always coming from people who do not understand what it's like to live with fluctuating energy, executive dysfunction, chronic pain, or burnout. Willpower gets treated like it's some kind of moral muscle. Like the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And maybe for neurotypical people, it does. I don't know. But to me, it sounds like something that some bro dude with a microphone made up so that he could get rage bait clicks on his podcast. But that's just me. Because that advice completely ignores how energy actually works. Because the truth is, willpower is not an unlimited resource. In fact, for a lot of us, it is the most fragile and unreliable resource that we have. And here's the frustrating part. Because sometimes willpower does work, but it only works in short bursts in very specific situations. It might help you power through a boring chore. It might help you resist that third cookie or the fifth cookie. I don't judge. But it is not meant to carry you through full body fatigue. It cannot push through emotional overwhelm. And it is not enough to force you out of bed when you can barely even open your eyes. Listen, when you depend on willpower as a means of functioning through every day and it doesn't show up for you, it doesn't just feel like you're too tired. Once again, it feels like you are failing yourself, like you're lazy and undisciplined and you are not applying yourself enough. Did I just give you a flashback to third grade? I'm so sorry. Because let's be clear, it is never about a lack of effort. It's just a mismatch between the tools you've been told to use and the reality of how your brain and your body operate. The brain is just not built to try harder on demand. It is built to protect you. And when your brain senses that something is overwhelming or unsustainable or pointless, it will resist. And that's not self-sabotage, it is survival mode. So when your mind tells you we can't do this, it's not being dramatic. It's trying to communicate a need to you. And the longer we try to ignore that signal, the worse resistance becomes. And here is where that becomes dangerous. Because if we allow ourselves to believe the myth that willpower fixes everything, we start to see every barrier as a personal flaw. Every unfinished task becomes a reason to feel ashamed, and every day of low energy becomes a personal failure. And that shame is heavy, which eats up emotional energy, which makes it even harder to start tomorrow. So what's the alternative? We stop relying on willpower. We stop blaming ourselves for not being machines. And we stop designing plans that require perfect energy and zero emotion. Because what you need is not a motivational speech. What you need is a system that meets you where you are. A system that helps you move forward when things are hard. And that could mean matching low energy tasks to low energy days. It could mean using visual reminders instead of relying on mental ones. It could mean building in recovery time instead of powering through until you crash. And we'll talk more about how to do those things in future videos. But for now, let's just get one thing straight. Needing support does not mean that you are lazy. Not pushing through does not mean that you're weak. And adjusting is not giving up. I guess that was 3 things. So can we please ditch the myth of if you wanted to, you would? And let's start designing your days in ways that actually work for your body, for your brain, and for your life. Let's pause here for a moment and repeat some very important information. I realize that some of these sections I'm covering the same things in a different way, and that is because I am trying to hammer home how important your mindset is going into this system. So I hope you're still with me, and I hope you understand that the reason I am repeating myself is because this information is so important. Your energy levels have nothing to do with your worth as a person. Canceling plans, changing your mind, or just slowing down do not make you selfish. But the world that we live in does not make it easy to believe that. We are surrounded by messages, both subtle and loud and blunt as hell, that tell us that productivity is a virtue, that hustle is holy, and that busy is the ultimate status symbol. You're supposed to be doing more, and you're supposed to be doing it faster, and you are supposed to be doing it all the time. And if you're not, then you are falling behind. You are not trying hard enough. You don't want it bad enough. And that mindset is so disgustingly toxic and wrong. And do you know how I know that it's toxic and wrong? Because when I said those things, one of 3 people just popped into your head. And no, I will not be naming them because I don't have to. And we don't do that here. When your energy fluctuates, when your body says no or your brain says not today, that hustle culture doesn't know what to do with you. And again, instead of blaming the system, they blame you because it couldn't be me. And how can you help but to believe them? How do you not spiral into questions like, why aren't I able to handle this? Why does everyone else seem fine? Why can't I just push through? And then cue the orchestra. Guilt, shame, and on the triangle, self-doubt. All because your energy didn't line up with what the world told you it should be? No, we're not doing that anymore. Look, I get it, because when you are inside the day-to-day grind and you see that untouched to-do list sitting on the table, it can be heartbreaking. And it really does feel like you should have been able to do more. But when you're dealing with inside obstacles like burnout, chronic fatigue, ADHD, what have you, people can't see it. And because they can't see it, they doubt it. They minimize it. And worst of all, we do the same damn thing to ourselves. We tell ourselves we should be better by now, that it's not a good enough reason to cancel, that needing help is embarrassing. None of those things are true. Your capacity is allowed to change. In fact, it is designed to change. Your needs are gonna shift from day to day, and you are not less valuable on low energy days. You don't deserve kindness more after you've been productive, and you do not have to earn rest. You do not need to fix yourself to be worthy of support. This shift in thinking is crucial because if we build a planning system that starts from the assumption that low energy is a flaw, the whole system becomes toxic. It turns your planner into a guilt machine, like it's a daily record of everything you didn't do. And that is not what we're doing here. What we are doing here is asking ourselves logical questions. What does my body need today? What kind of tasks actually feel doable in this moment? Where can I soften? Where can I simplify? What can I let go? Because thoughtful, intentional choices that protect your well-being allow you to keep showing up for your life in a way that is sustainable. So can we please stop treating energy like it's some kind of personality trait? It is not a measure of goodness, and it is not proof of how much or how little you care. It is just one variable in a much bigger, very human picture. If you have been part of the neurodivergent, ADHD, chronic illness, or mental health communities in any capacity over the last few years, then you've probably heard of spoon theory. For those who haven't, the very boiled down basic idea is using spoons as a metaphor for energy tokens, we'll say. It was a term that was coined by Christine Miserandino. I'm never sure if I'm saying her name correctly. And it's just like a simplified term to explain a very complex situation around people who have ADHD or chronic illnesses and how their energy works differently than neurotypical people are familiar with. I have a whole video on spoon theory if you want to check that out when we're done here. The point is, many people wake up with like a drawer full of spoons and they get to spend them on whatever they want, but other people start with way fewer spoons. Some people start the day with 0 spoons, and that fluctuates from person to person, day to day. And you never know how many spoons you're going to wake up with tomorrow. And that unpredictability is exhausting all by itself. So when we talk about planning systems, when we talk about organizing our lives, building routines, managing tasks, it is vital that we understand just how different the experience is when your energy is constantly in flux. If you are someone with a full and steady drawer of spoons every single morning, you can probably follow a standard productivity routine. Time blocking, goal stacking, habit tracking, all of that stuff probably works great for you. But for my fellow Spoonies, those systems don't just fall short, they actually tend to backfire because traditional productivity systems are built on consistency. But life with inconsistent energy is anything but consistent. Your body may wake up in full, excruciating pain. Your brain might feel like it is swimming in fog. You might be overstimulated, emotionally drained, mentally fatigued, or all of the above. Some days, basic tasks like just brushing your teeth or sending an email feel like you are standing at the base of Everest and you don't even know how to take the first step. And other days, you might get that spark of clarity that makes you feel like you can take on the world. So you do, and then the next day you crash. And this push-crash cycle is brutal. And if you're here, I am betting that is the cycle you have been living your life in. I know I have. This is why I started creating this system in the first place. Because I lived in a constant cycle of hustle, 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 burnout. Hustle, 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 burnout. Hustle, 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 burnout. It was never ending. And every time I got to the hustle part of the cycle, I had less and less to give. And the burnout would last longer and longer. But this system allows for variation. It gives space for nuance. It helped me build a structure that bends with my needs instead of constantly breaking under them. And that's why I knew I had to bring it to you too. By reframing how I plan, I'm finally able to really move the needle on my dreams and on my goals. But I'm no longer pedal to the metal until I break. So whether your energy changes day to day or hour to hour, you're not doing anything wrong, because energy-aware planning is not about fixing you. It's about supporting you. It is about building something sustainable, flexible, and rooted in how you actually feel, not how you think you should be performing. And in the next video, we're going to take that even deeper. Because before you can start planning in a way that protects your energy, you need to understand what kinds of energy you're actually working with. Physical energy is a piece of it, yes. But we're also going to talk about mental and emotional energies as well. We're going to talk about how they interact with each other. And we're going to talk about how to start recognizing and tracking your own patterns. So if you've ever wondered, why do I feel fine physically, but I still can't get anything done? Or why do the simplest decisions feel absolutely overwhelming today? Then video 2 is going to help bring some clarity, because this is where we're going to start giving language to what your energy is actually doing and how to work with it instead of fighting against it every day. So hit that subscribe button, go get yourself some water, stretch if you're able to, and go get some rest. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.